We're just going to let people in and before we get started. So just get settled. All right. Well, we're going to get ourselves started as people are starting to still come in. Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be joining us from in the world today. We're so thrilled that you're here. Thank you for joining this webinar entitled A Shared Language for Clinical Research, How Technical Organizations Are Embracing Plain Language and Implementing the MRCT Center Clinical Research Glossary. Like I said, we're so thrilled that you can be here today. Please be reminded this webinar is being recorded and the materials will be available in the next week or two on the MRCT Center website. So you'll be able to access these slides and the materials, the video, and be able to share that with others in your network as well. Also, just want to remind folks to please use the Q&A function for any questions that you might have, and please think about those questions that you might have, drop them in the Q&A so we can keep track of them more easily. And then, of course, the chat is available as well. And if you want to put your love in the chat, no questions because we want to track them in the Q&A, but love, hearts, exclamation points that are effusively saying how great the work is that we're doing, we welcome that tremendously. So please feel free to do that. Um, Next slide, please. So in order for us to get started, I'll just note the typical disclaimer that none of us have any conflicts of interest to disclose in relation to the materials here today, and none of these necessarily reflect the positions of Brigham and Women's Hospital, Harvard University, or any other entity. But we continue to do this work. Regardless of who funds us, we remain, it remains under our control. It's our autonomous work, and we share it out then via our Creative Commons license. Next slide, please. So in terms of the overview, we'll sort of get you oriented a little bit with patient centricity, health literacy, and clinical research, and then dive right into talking about patient centricity and health literacy in the context of data sciences with the Society for Clinical Data Management, who you'll hear more about, and then think about data standards landscape in the context of patient centricity with CDISC, the Clinical Data Interchange Standards Consortium. We'll have some discussion amongst ourselves and of course any Q&A from the audience, and then any final thoughts and wrap up. Next slide, please. So I'd like to take this moment to introduce myself. I've been here at the MRCT Center. I'm a program director, and I've been here for the last 7 years, and have had the privilege, very serendipitously, of running the health literacy and patient engagement kind of work that we do, and really focusing on how we can improve communication with participants and also bi-directional communication, the way in which we can also be better listeners to our populations and the folks that we're working with in order to deliver resources that really support folks in the best ways possible. I'm joined today by fantastic colleagues that I've had the pleasure of working with over the last several years, in fact, and they've just made this work for me so much more impactful and positive. And they've really inspired me to think beyond sort of offering a glossary, a dictionary, if you will, on a website, to all the ways in which we can actually integrate plain language, clinical research terminology that is easy to understand into all parts of the clinical trial ecosystem. So I'll be joining the stage with Erin Muehlbrot, who's at the NCI EVS and helps support CDISC terminology. I'll be joined by Rebecca Baker, who's also at CDISC, and both of them are on the clinical research glossary workgroup with me. And I also have folks from SCDM who will be joining me. That's Carol Ann Schaefer. She's the 2025 chair of SCDM. as well as Claudine Moore, who's the editor-in-chief of the Journal of the Society for Clinical Data Management. And she's also a member of the Clinical Research Work Group. And so I'm just thrilled that they'll be here to be able to share their experiences organizationally around health literacy and their experience with the glossary. Next slide, please. So before I turn the mics over to them, I just want to give a very brief overview of the MRCT Center and the ways in which patient centricity, health literacy, and clinical research data have kind of come together. A focus on participant understanding really benefits everyone. And I'll say that a few times today. Everyone from the clinical ops teams in pharma to the trialists to the researchers and the clinical research coordinators at the sites, all the way, of course, to the end users, the patients, participants, and the public. Next slide, please. Many of you, no doubt, since you're here, know that the MRCT Center, the multi-regional clinical trial center of Brigham and Women's Hospital and Harvard, has existed for over 15 years now. And we've been doing this work around focusing on addressing the conduct, oversight, ethics, and regulatory environment for clinical trials around the world for those 15 years. To do that work, next slide, please, we engage diverse stakeholders from all over the ecosystem to really define what are these emerging issues in the clinical trial space and also what are the continuing issues in the clinical trial space. So I would say continuing to have patient centricity and clear communication continues to be one of those things that we need to focus on. So we work across with all of our interest holders to work with them collaboratively then to create and implement ethical, actionable, and practical solutions, always focusing how folks can take what we're doing in their terms of lofty principles and guidance documents and really put them into action in their own roles. And that's how we're trying to fulfill this vision of improving the integrity, safety, and rigor of global clinical trials. And I'll say that from the beginning, the patient and the participant has actually sort of, in many ways, been the unspoken heart of the work. Whether we're talking about data sharing, whether we're talking about return of results, or we're talking about regulatory harmonization to speed approvals across regions, across countries. We're talking about it in the context of making sure that there are safe and effective research studies, safe research studies and safe and effective treatments for the populations that stand to benefit from them, and that those are available in a timely fashion. So that's really, what we're trying to do. Next slide, please. And it's really been in recent years that the underlying important and critical part of our mission has kind of surfaced more and to be more like the crux of so much of the work that we're doing here, to be more explicitly patient-centric, more explicitly patient-focused materials to help support clinical research understanding, clinical trial enrollment, and follow-through for participants all the way through to the end. That's hopefully a positive experience in the clinical trial. So we have several resources now that we're starting to click through here that are really foundational information for participants and the public. Things that we started with, like the Participants' Bill of Rights, really a general set of principles to guide participants in what their rights are in clinical trials. We focus on special populations like pediatric populations, helping to make sure we're creating resources like these infographics to help explain what research is, what assent means, all these kinds of things, all the way to creating specific materials that are really focused on specific topics, like helping participants understand what individual research results being returned to them might look like. What does that mean? And if they're being returned to them, what should they be thinking about? Would they like to receive those? Do they have a choice in the matter? And sort of being able to make decisions around that. And if there's one more click, you'll see that there's the URL there. And I know that Kaylee Tove, the program manager that I've been working with over the last few years as well, is putting all of the links into the chat so you can access them there too and click on them. So really what we're doing is taking whatever work we're doing, we're trying to turn the lens towards thinking about what is the participant or the patient wanting to know in this situation? What is their need for understanding? And we've been engaging patients and participants more and more in trying to gain that understanding as a center and focus on ways that we can support structural improvements within the ecosystem that really centers patients and participants more explicitly. Next slide, please. And so I'll also just put a quick plug in that in terms of, again, continuing education, and that we are also focused today really on data, data organizations, data standards organizations, data scientists. We've been creating resources that just released last month around data literacy, again, for patients and participants to really understand what data, is, what happens to it when it's collected, what are the protections around it, and so on. We're really trying to contribute to creating an environment that shows we care about people understanding how they're involved in research. We care about making sure there are resources out there that support clinical trial participants and help them be empowered in their decision making. Next slide, please. So of course I can't have any conversation, and this is what this whole webinar is about, about patient centricity and health literacy without talking about the clinical research glossary, which is why we're here today. And this has been developed over the last several years and has become a trusted source of clinical research information that's developed with patients and other interest holders in the industry to ensure we have a robust resource here that is not only providing accurate definitions around clinical trials and clinical research, but also understandable information that's there for everyone to use. Next slide, please. So in terms of the timeline, this all started back in 2013 in the sense that health literacy really became a focus in the center when we were working on a toolkit before I ever got here, toolkit and guidance around return of results, both aggregate and individual results. I already mentioned some of the individual results work. But the aggregate results work really was focused on the EU mandate around plain language summaries, and that sponsors needed to start providing those results, those plain language summaries of the study results to patients and participants, which is now been enacted and is in place in Europe. But that conversation around, well, how are sponsors and how are researchers going to focus on plain language? What does that even mean? Health literacy really was the center of it. So when I came on board in 2018, that became my focus area, and I've been lucky to be able to contribute to various resources in the health literacy space here at the center, from a general resource on health literacy and clinical research to IRB trainings and IRB checklists focused on their role in health literacy and promoting health literacy, to infographics at the beginning of COVID to explain research in the context of COVID-19, to the glossary pilot project being launched. Next slide, please. And then we were able to have version 1 released in 2021. And it was that was after the pilot, and it was so successful that we were able to continue expanding it, and it drew attention. It kind of entered the environment, and CDISC took notice, and then SCDM later took notice as well as we've been expanding our efforts. And so becoming a global standard with CDISC and now being part of the SCDM environment as well has really lent itself, to really expanding the reach of plain language to all the folks that could benefit from it. Next slide, please. And so where I'll sort of start to wrap up here is that these are really coming down. So all of this is really coming down to what we understand to be organizational health literacy. In the past, health literacy has been defined as applying only to the individual, and it's sort of in this vacuum of health literacy being one person's ability to find and use and understand information. And it really never truly took into account that truly bi-directional nature of communication. And now we're saying that communicators have a responsibility and obligation to communicate in ways that are understandable, that are setting people up for success and are prioritizing interaction with individuals to really ascertain what information they need to know, when do they need to know it, how do we deliver that information in ways that are really the best possible ways. And so today we're kind of celebrating this idea of organizational health literacy with the MRCT Center and CDISC and SCDM, and this quest to kind of bring that overall ethos of our collective responsibility to sharing and making research information understandably available that truly benefits everyone. Next slide, please. And it benefits everyone really because we're talking about patients and participants. Those are sort of the direct recipients again of information that's designed, well designed for them. But you'll also hear the benefits to industry. It benefits the new junior employees that are being onboarded into this industry and really need to understand the information, understand how to communicate that information to participants every day, and need resources to be able to say, yeah, this is how I could say this. This is how I could explain this in ways that not only I understand, but the people I'm talking to understand. And overall, we also want to support patients themselves, research participation towards thinking about inclusion and representation, right? Making research information available that expands the reach of that information so that we are really reaching diverse populations and supporting them throughout. And it serves organizations and particular business needs around the scientific responsibility, right? It's good science to be clear and inclusive so that our research reflects the populations that stand to benefit. And it is also fiduciarily responsible, right? It meets your bottom line needs, right? If you're able to finish trials faster, better, more complete, able to get your results, move on to other studies because you're able to provide information that participants can understand, and you're really smoothing the pathway for clinical trials to happen. Next slide, please. So with that, I will end my remarks with the words of Rob Wecker. Rob is a patient advocate I've also had the privilege of working with over the last few years. And he's on our expert advisory committee for the glossary. And he always refers to patients being our true north. Patients and participants are the North Star that we should be at the center of how we think about research, making the research industry more transparent, more engaging, and more trustworthy. So patients are our true north. So with that, next slide, I'll turn it over to my colleagues at SCDM and I'll allow them to introduce themselves and share their slides and their information, and we'll move on then to CDISC. And as you know, I noted in the overview, we'll be able to have discussion after this presentation. So start thinking about questions you might want to drop in the Q&A, and we'll do our best to answer them when we get to that part of the program. Thank you so much, and I pass it on to you. I believe we're going to start with you, Carol.
Thanks, Sylvia. And hello, everyone. Again, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you for joining us. I did look at the attendee list, and I am incredibly impressed by the number of people who are here and the global reach of this webinar. So I'm very excited to be able to share the information of how SCDM fits into this wonderful picture that Sylvia has outlined. So the Society for Clinical Data Management, we are committed to a healthier world. Next slide, please. And, just to give you a little background of who we are a nonprofit organization. We're an organization of professionals. We span academia, the sponsor, so that would be pharma companies, large, small, medium size, clinical research organizations, regulatory agencies, and technical providers. We serve the clinical data management and clinical data science profession as well as research professionals. So you don't have to be in clinical data management to be part of SCDM. You can be involved in the clinical research environment and still have a place. We set the stage for data management and framing the future. So we are very much about what's happening now, but we are even more so about what's coming. And I think as I give this presentation, the reason for that is because things are coming fast and furious. We've always said that my entire career. I've heard how things are coming quickly. I do believe in the last 5 years that has exponentially exploded. We do research, education, and certification. So those are really our hallmarks and our pillars of focus. We have conferences, and of course, as with all professional organizations, we are great for networking. Our vision is to lead the clinical data science industry for a healthier world. So it is to focus on those 3 areas, but the ultimate goal is to have a healthier world. And we each work in our own area, our own industry, but we all have the same goal, and that goal is the patient. Our true north is also the patient. We have a mission to accelerate development. As Sylvia alluded to, yes, it comes down to the bottom line, The bottom line is also the faster we can get a medicine, a vaccine, something approved, the healthier somebody can be. People can either avoid illness or they can treat the illness that they have. And the faster we're able to do that, the quicker they have a healthier life. We are focused on preparing the industry and professionals for the evolution of management of health data, again, through education, best practices, and certification. We engage and partner. This is the perfect example of how we're doing that. We engage and partner with our policymakers, our regulators, patient organizations, and key stakeholders. So as you can see, just from this alone, this is an example of one of the areas of focus of our partnership within the industry. Next slide, please. So in 2024, just to give a little background, we consolidated our strategic plan. So every 3 years, 5 years, we come up with a strategic map. What is it that we're looking at? Where are we? Where do we want to go? So last year, we sat down and we said, okay, we've been in this map for a while. How can we consolidate and establish ourselves as a leader in the industry? So the first thing, and focusing on education, we want to bridge the skills gap. We have a tremendous number of young junior level professionals coming out of school who have far more technical knowledge than I do in terms of what is the latest and greatest in AI, in machine learning, in all of the technical bioinformatics that's out there, that cutting edge technical research. I have 30 years experience in the industry. There's the gap between us, and how do we bridge that gap? So we've done that through various certifications. We have conferences with a global reach. We want to promote lifelong learning. People have said to me, junior level people have said to me, how do you maintain your professional education? How do you maintain what you've done in your career? And my answer is I'm constantly learning, and I want to learn. And then we do strategic investments in talent and technological capabilities in education. So we are in the process of launching a new AI-driven learning platform. All of this is being foundationally supported by a competency framework, which I'll show you next. But let's talk about the other two. We expand through partnerships. So again, as I alluded to, we have the partnership here. We have a regulatory council through a public-private partnership with the FDA. So we actually sit and go through and discuss, what are some of the guidances that are coming through? How can we help review? How can they help us create some of our guidances? What input can they have in our conferences? So that we're having an ongoing conversation. We're expanding our corporate partnership program to reach other areas of the professional world to gain more knowledge and more substance around clinical research. We're expanding our regions of growth. So globally, we are expanding in all areas of the world. And of course, the collaboration we have here with MRCT, CDISC. And this is all helping us influence through leadership. So we have JSCDM, which is the Journal of SCDM, which is a quarterly publication. It includes our good clinical data management chapters. And Claudine, my colleague Claudine, will talk more about JSCDM in a few minutes. We have a career journey. We have insights into the Certified Clinical Data Associate and Certified Clinical Data Scientist roles through on-demand free webinars. So people who are interested can watch these webinars and can learn about where am I starting, where can I go? And then, we have updates from the industry. And at the moment, we have about 15 podcasts, maybe more, under SCDM, wherever you get your podcasts. So if you want to listen to, if you're a podcast listener when you drive or when you walk, there are some great podcasts out there about the clinical data management world. Next slide, please. So this is the framework I alluded to. I won't dive into great detail on this. This could be its own webinar. But what we did was we said, what is it what does it take to be a clinical data manager or clinical data scientist? What are the skills? Where are the competencies? Where do they fall? And this is really what we came up with. So there are 7 external areas that are the core competencies of our profession. And then under them are the skills and the areas that we would like, people as they work through their career to focus on and learn about. This by no means is a static document and an image. This will constantly change. Again, as the industry evolves, this will also evolve. These are the core ones though, and these are ones that to be successful in the industry, we are supporting our profession to upskill and gain knowledge in each of these areas. Next slide, please. So we want to drive change to address industry challenges. There are challenges. Every industry has them, right? So what is it that we're doing to address the challenges in our industry? Leadership is definitely one of the things that we're doing. So we're leveraging innovation and thought leadership. We want to identify where are the needs, how do we develop best practices and standards to adapt? And again, through these partnerships, and that leads us to the influence area, through the partnerships that we have and the interaction that we have with organizations such as this, such as regulators and policymakers, we can provide industry expertise, and we can provide that expertise as a well-rounded expertise, not just a single viewpoint or focus. So it allows us to influence how is the industry moving, how do we address the challenge that's in front of us, understanding that we're getting input from multi sources. We are transforming the industry. We're driving our profession from very task-oriented clinical data management, which is very important. The tasks are important, to clinical data science, which is more leveraging the automations that are available now, being innovative, utilizing critical thinking, and really assessing what is the data in front of us and how can we apply that knowledge to the future needs that will present itself very quickly in front of us. And we do this through the education and certification. We want to make sure, again, going back to that framework, that the profession is ready to face the challenges. And we're growing. The professional footprint of clinical data management, clinical data science is global, and that industry expertise drives that leadership. So we get input from around the world, from leaders around the world that are helping influence and transform the profession. And again, professional growth and certification really underlies a lot of what we do. The more you know, the more you grow, right? Next slide, please. So our vision for 2030, so I had talked about in 2024, we looked at our strategic plan. We said, okay, well, where are we? Where do we want to go? Our vision for 2030, and it really is 2030 and beyond. So it's 5 years, but as quickly as things change, it could be beyond. Where are we focusing? Well, we're certainly focusing on what we like to call clinical research 2.0. And this is really the line between clinical research and healthcare continues to blur. And it has a lot to do with real world data usage, the adoption of innovation in study design, how data is collected, how is data analyzed, and really making sure that we're getting to improved patient outcomes. So how we did clinical research 10 years ago, 20 years ago is very different than how we're doing it today. And a lot of it is technologically based, and a lot of it is also based on the patient and the patient voice. And I'll get to that in a second. The end-to-end data flow is something that we're really focusing on. So the digital protocol driven data flows, integrations of data sources, again, the real world data aspect, there's a lot of data out there that we haven't even looked at as an industry, and what answers lie in that data, and how do we mine that data to get to the answers that we need while reducing the burden on the patient. Intelligent technologies, I alluded to it a little bit earlier. We have artificial intelligence, machine learning, and whatever comes next. Today, I'm talking about AI ML. In 5 years, I could be talking about something else. So it's really, really important that we understand and are able to leverage the technology that's out there. You can understand it, but if you can't leverage it, it's no use, right? So we want to be able to leverage it. Finally, and I left this one to last because this is the purpose of this webinar, right, is the patient choice. It is really important that the patient voice has been shaping how we do our work, and more so now than ever before. 10 years ago, there were patient advocacy groups, but did we really get input from them in terms of how, let's say, I do my job? Now we do. Now we hear them. We talk to them. We engage them as we're designing the clinical trials. We meet with the groups. We ask what do they want. We also are trying to incorporate multi-source data streams to, again, reduce the burden on the patient. So these are things that we are focusing on as an industry. And what's really important about this is that through SCDM, we want to consider all of this, all of these four areas in how are we developing our guidance? How are we educating our professionals? How are we evolving our roles? So that's our role as a society, is looking at this vision and saying, okay, this is what's in front of us. This is what's coming. How do we get ready for it? How do we work in it now and be ready for it in the future? Next slide, please. So I'm going to hand this off to Claudine, my colleague, who is the editor-in-chief of JSCDM, and have her walk you through the journal. Claudine?
Thank you so much, Carol. And thank you all for being here. As Carol mentioned, I'm very impressed and thankful for all of our participants today and anyone who may watch this later on demand. As Carol mentioned, the Society for Clinical Data Management, one of our main focuses is education and also innovation. And so this is something that we do through the journal. So what is the journal? It's a scholarly publication. It's open access, and we are registered in the directory of open access journals. It began in 2020. It used to be a newsletter, and we transformed it into this open access scholarly peer-reviewed journal. And the focus is on publishing the science behind operations, data collection, its use in studies, and we go even further, depending on whatever articles we receive. If they are pertinent to our world, then we certainly do pursue them and then put them through our rigorous process prior to publication. We're also compliant with the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors, and we are also in collaboration with CDISC as well as MRCT. And we have enough articles at this point that we are preparing for our application to index in PubMed Central. So that's a really exciting thing for us. Next slide, please. All right. And then I just have a couple of slides to show our journal impact, if you will, globally. So you can see, and I just showed the top 10 countries here. We've only been around since 2020. And if you look at the views of our articles, they're pretty impressive. And I'm actually, every time I see them, it makes me more excited to be the chief editor. We're doing something right. So I hope we continue to serve the community well. So we're viewed literally, I guess it used to be 160 the last time I looked. Now we're at 180. So that's really exciting. And then the next slide, please. And just to give you an idea of how our work is impacting other work, 14 of our JSCDM articles have been published across 16 different journals, and they've been cited 30 different times. So it's possible that in some of the journals they were cited more than once. But as you can see, personally, I think it's really good that JSCDM is not number one. We are in there. We have cited ourselves a couple times, but you'll see we have quite a bit of journals who are citing us quite regularly. And they are journals that are very pertinent to what we do as clinical data scientists. And I think I may have one more slide. Thank you. And so how is it that JSCDM incorporates this glossary? Well, you can see here, this is our splash screen, if you will, of the journal. And when you go to the little glossary tab, we have both an SCDM glossary, and then if you click on the MRCT glossary, excuse me, if you click on MRCT glossary, it'll take you directly to the MRCT glossary itself. We've also added some language here as far as what is this MRCT glossary, which is what we've been talking about today. And then as you go through the different terms, if there's a term that is also in the glossary, we have a link right under that term. So for instance, adverse reaction or adverse event, that is a term that is in the MRCT glossary. So whomever is reading the SCDM glossary can read the more technical term and also link out to the term that's been created for a better understanding, especially if someone is newer to the industry. And this is how we, as an educational society, or having education as one of our main pillars, help use the MRC glossary to educate our younger, less experienced colleagues, or people who, as Carol mentioned, are just coming out of school. And then there are those of us who've been in for 20 plus years, and we're finding a way to bridge the gap, because there are so many terms, there's so many things to learn about. And I know when I was first learning, they can be very intimidating, but by going to the MRCT glossary and you get the little audio, you get a picture, the definition is easy to understand. And I think that's a really great start as a building block for education, as far as the clinical data managers, clinical data scientists, and as Carol mentioned, whatever we may become in the future, we don't know. So I believe that's my last slide. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Claudine and Carol. And so we'll pass it along to our CDISC colleagues now. Next slide, please. And I think we're going to, are we starting with you, Rebecca?
Yes, yes.
All right, awesome. So thank you so much. So loved hearing how SCDM has been really thinking about sort of plain language as part of their data track, their data scientist track. And now Rebecca will lead us with how CDISC has sort of been thinking about this too in the data standards landscape.
Yes, next slide. So who is CDISC and what do we do? CDISC is a standards development organization started by 3 volunteers, and now we have over 1,100 volunteers worldwide to support global research. The standards are freely available on the CDISC website and cover the clinical research process from beginning to end. When CDISC standards are used, the data can live beyond one single study and be contributed to data repositories such as Vivli and Critical Path Institute, so that researchers can then access that data and do further research across similar studies. Next slide. The CDISC community includes alliances and partnerships working toward enabling the research ecosystem. Through these partnerships and our members, we do our work. So thank you, for without you, we could not do the work that we do. Next slide. CDISC supports the clinical research information lifecycle, from study design and build in machine-readable format and human-readable format to study execution. This lends itself to the transition that Carol mentioned, that JSCDM, going from data managers to data science, as you see all these lovely pieces of our CDISC puzzle. This is all based on the controlled terminology that is curated and maintained by the NCI Enterprise Vocabulary Service. Next slide. And with this, I would like to introduce you to Erin Mawbrat, who's going to talk about the NCI EVS.
Thanks, Rebecca. So CDISC and the U.S. National Cancer Institute's Enterprise Vocabulary Services have enjoyed a very long and fruitful relationship in the support of the development, harmonization, publication, and maintenance of CDISC controlled terminologies. This terminology superset supports the CDISC foundational standards and various standards development projects that are undertaken by CDISC in order to support the needs of its user community. CDISC controlled terminology is required for use in data submissions to the US FDA and the Japan PMDA, and it is also preferred for use by the Chinese NMPA and recommended for use by the European EMA. Next slide, please. These supersets include terminology to support study management, data collection, data tabulation, data analysis, data transmission, and the electronic trial master file. CDISC also publishes 2 glossaries, the CDISC glossary, which is a more technically scoped business glossary, and the co-published MRCT plain language glossary. So we have links to MRCT, the MRCT terminology within the MRCT glossary, and we also publish it out in additional file formats. But the primary place you would get the MRCT glossaries would still be the MRCT website. And coming soon, CDISC is also going to be publishing the semantics to support the ICH M11 protocol template, which we're very excited about. So NCI EVS publishes these terminologies in 6 file types, and with each biannual release of terminology, we also provide changes files that specify the changes made in comparison to previous versions of the terminology. All CDISC terminology files are stored and archived on the NCI FTP. And finally, links to all of the CDISC terminology publications can be found in multiple places, including the NCI website, which is what you're seeing on the left-hand side there. And then if you click one more time, you will see then there's also, you also will find that terminology on the CDISC website, and click one more time. You will find that terminology also on our EVS Explore browser, which contains all of the terminologies within the NCI thesaurus. And then we have access through the EVS browser to an API, as well as you can get the MRCT glossary terminology, of course, on the MRCT website. So one more click, please. So this is, so the CDISC, I mentioned this a little bit a while ago, the CDISC and MRCT glossary terminologies are stored in the NCI thesaurus, which is a biomedical coding terminology system. And this is a screenshot of the EVS Explore browser illustrating the concept of trial phase. It has that unique alphanumeric C code that you're going to see on the top left-hand corner, C48281. And that NCI C code allows multiple sources to tag, name, and define a concept, all while allowing the meaning of that concept to stay harmonized across various sources. You can see here with the red block there that this, you can see here that this concept is owned by the NCI, CDISC, and MRCT's plain language glossary. Soon we will have we'll be adding another row there that will also indicate that it's owned by ICH, as this concept does show up in the ICH M11 protocol as well. The definitions, you'll notice, may differ slightly, but by assigning this NCI C code, all groups agree that we mean the same thing and use the term in the same way. Click one more time, please. One of our metadata tags, the concept and subset association, allows us to specify exactly which code lists or value sets each of these terms belong to. And overall, this terminology maintenance space of the NCI thesaurus allows us to generate terminology publications and keep semantic harmonization within and across sources. The use of the NCI C code allows semantic interoperability within computer systems, and ensure that use and meaning of a term stays consistent across the entirety of the data life cycle. And I'll hand it back to Rebecca now.
Okay, next slide. Okay, so I'll talk about some CDISC initiatives. Next slide. And I'm just going to whet your appetite. Kaylee's going to put links to webinars in the chat so that way you can see the full detail of the initiatives. So the ICH M11 and CDISC USDM. M11 is a working group within ICH that has produced 3 documents for clinical research. And that is with a focus on the human readable view. Then the CDISC USDM is the Unified Study Definitions Model, which is a logical model with associated controlled terminology. And Aaron touched on the controlled terminology. So it's designed to provide industry and academia with a consistent way to digitize study designs. This includes all types of study designs and provides support for the protocol document templates and supports precision definition of the study design, including the schedule of activities. Now, the work with ICH M11 and CDISC USDM is being done by CDISC and Transcelerate as part of the Greater Digital Data Flow project. And there's also a connected project called Utilizing the Digital Protocol, which is one of the HL7 fire accelerators, and that Vulcan connects the digital protocol to healthcare. Thus, ICH provides the template, CDISC can translate the models and terminology, and then Vulcan provides the implementation and testing. And of course, ICH is part of the terminology as well. Next slide. So the 360i project focuses on closing gaps with the goal of expanding and connecting our standards to drive automation across the study information lifecycle from study design through analysis results. This ambitious transformation will unify the CDISC standards, equipping stakeholders with innovative tools and methodologies that enable the automation, minimize variability, and elevate data quality. Next slide. Click. All right. So first, and this is a quick tour. There are 2 very good webinars that I encourage you to watch to get all the details. So at Study Design, we well-define enable study teams to build information, leveraging systems and processes through the digital workflow. Click. The digital protocol must be well-fed, a well-defined set of endpoints and connected to concepts that drive information. The CDISC standards will be connected from the definition of an endpoint to the corresponding concepts that support it along the necessary metadata to define aggregation and analysis of the study. Now 3 more clicks. So we're going to end-to-end machine executable specifications and leveraging the metadata to extract the data from a wide range of possible data sources into a common data store. 1 more click. And then doing it over and over, perfecting the process and building better in the future. Next slide. XShare is a project. It's a collaborative initiative with 40 consortium members, 6 of which are standards development organizations. XShare is working towards enabling individuals, patients, all of us to access their data in a user-friendly format to facilitate cross-border healthcare and data access, streamlining clinical research and public health through standards. Envision this future state. Next week is the CDISC European Interchange. And let's say one of you were there in Geneva and you have a mishap, you break your leg and you require surgery. While managing your medical condition like atrial fibrillation and taking blood thinners. If the XShare was in place, you could securely and digitally share your medical data with your doctor in Switzerland. An additional use case is facilitating sharing your data for participation in a research study. So that is the goal, to make it better for patients. Next slide. So now I'm going to put it all together for you. The digitized protocol from CDISC 360i and the USDM M11, which M11 is part of the 360i. It's a sub-project in connecting all the standards. So your study is approved by regulatory authorities and the ethics board, and you open for study enrollment. The patient was identified and screened because they shared their data for research with the XShare, and their data was available. They were consented, they met the criteria for the study, they were enrolled. The patient was provided a patient-facing digital study schedule of activities, which provided their visits, their visit windows, the study activities, the procedures, the labs, where they needed to fast and how long. And the informed consent and the patient-facing information was informed by the MRCT plain language glossary. And the glossary was also provided as an additional resource for the patient. And the data management or data science best practices were informed by SCDM. Thus, a high quality, efficient study processes were utilized, resulting in a seamless process. So with the digital protocol, the schedule of activities can be surfaced, and this is a vision for the future, with an end user by role. So the patient would have their facing one, the investigator there facing one, study staff theirs, and the research office theirs. So let's say at the last minute, this patient here was invited on a cruise by their friend Sally, and that required them to reschedule their research appointment. So they were able to pull up their digital schedule and digitally move their appointment within the window. And all the related study appointment activities and procedures, such as the CT scan with the research protocol for radiology, then would automatically update and align with that new visit. Next slide. And just click 5 times. Okay. So thus, we're transitioning from a world where standards are a necessary requirement to a valuable enabler through connected, ready-to-use, implementable standards for all of these stakeholders listed on the slide, providing all of the benefits there as you see on the right. Next slide. So the vision for the future. Together, we can do so much more. Thank you.
Which is so true. And so with the last few minutes we have, why don't we take the slides down for a second? If you don't mind, Kristen, we'll try to pop them up again at the end because there's a webinar coming up around public review we want to tell you about and put the registration link in. In fact, Kaylee, maybe you can already just put the registration link in for that webinar just in case we don't get to that. And also just lots of work we're doing on representation and research. And that really is at the intersection of health literacy and the scientific data pieces of it. What are we collecting? How are we collecting it? And inclusion. So we want to make sure you have access to those resources too. Now let's talk a little bit about, well, first of all, there's a specific question for you, Rebecca, around translation. You might want to just type in the answer in there from Barb to let Barbara know that specific thing. I think I'd really like to get at sort of, how did you even get the glossary integrated to begin with? Like, did you have to go through lots of approvals? You know, there might be folks here. I know we had a lot of folks registering from Canada. Maybe there's sort of folks from different health systems as well who are thinking about, like, are there hurdles to think about in terms of taking this glossary? I know sometimes folks are really sensitive around, why should we link to some external thing? Like, why should people link to this glossary? And like, how did you go about using this glossary and integrating into your stuff? So maybe, Carol, you want to mention it from an SCDM standpoint, and, you know, we can have a CDISC thought on that too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think from an SCDM perspective, the glossary has multiple uses. As Claudine had mentioned, you know, we have, as people enter the industry, enter the profession, it's like having a second language, right? It's the ability to be bilingual. And so, we speak in acronyms, we speak in terminology, and it takes a really long time without a glossary to try to understand what people are saying and what they're referring to. So the glossary, from a professional education perspective, really sets a level, starting point for everyone. Everyone has the information. Everyone speaks the same language. And that's super important. I think from a, again, when we talk about incorporating or having conversations with patients, patient advocacy groups, the glossary helps because, again, it's the same outcome. It's everybody speaking the same language. And so it's really important for us to get that out there. It shouldn't be super secret, right? There's no secret handshake to know what we're talking about. And I think decades ago it was this, there was the veil, and then there was the clinical trials, and you kind of went through the veil, but you trusted the people who were conducting the trials. And that trust is still there, but now there's more transparency and more knowledge about how to, what's being done and what the participation is. And then as a professional, same thing. It's that transparency of what is it that we're actually doing, and what does it all mean?
And as we're doing this more, I mean, I think it's more and more people use this glossary. I think it can point to our leadership to say, look, this is a reputable thing for us to be using. We don't have to create our own in order for it to be reputable. And you can also see that we've worked with folks in different ways to have the glossary integrated in so that you can be linking to it externally, or you can embed it within your systems. There's lots of different ways to do it to make it more palatable to leadership, to make this available. And Rebecca or Aaron, I don't know if you wanted to share anything from a CDISC standpoint. Rebecca, feel free to go ahead.
Well, in terms of sharing the glossary, I work with a lot of different groups. They actually are, for example, we have 40 partners on that, and I've shared the link to the MRCT glossary, and I've told people about it, and they're so excited to have this resource, and especially with the pictures and the plain language to be able to use for research, but also it, as has been noted, that it's a great resource all in all.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And Aaron, you came off mute. Did you want to mention something?
Just to piggyback on something that Carol said, that the presence of a definition, I cannot stress enough how important that is, that consensus-based definition. And you know very well how sort of hard won some of those are, but I cannot tell you, and I've done this work I've done some terminology work for a very long time. And humans, we have an uncanny ability to have our own biases and understanding of what words mean. And so none of us are actually truly speaking the same language, which should frighten us a little, bit. Without that published consensus-based decision on what a term actually means, and using words and language and sentences to create boundaries about what that term means and doesn't mean, we actually truly are never speaking the same language unless we have that baseline glossary or terminology to fall back on. So without a standard definition for something, be it a plain language definition or a technical definition, we are truly not speaking the same language, even for those of us that are all technically speaking the same language. So these terminologies, these glossaries are insanely important, especially when we think about looking at data from, 1, 2, 5, 10, 20 years ago. In the future, when we're looking at data that we're generating now, without that glossary, none of it means anything. We're sitting on gold mines of data, but without semantics underpinning it, it means nothing. So these glossaries are insanely important.
I love it. And I appreciate those words. And I think, Claudine, for just to give you a chance, I know we have less than a minute and we want to make sure we let people go off for their days. The journal is sort of using the glossary right now, but has visions of other opportunities, other ways of thinking about plain language, right? Moving forward. So, in terms of going, where do we go from here? We're going to keep on expanding and growing the way we think about plain language being integrated even into journals. Do you want to share just a couple of seconds about that, Claudine?
Of course. Thank you. Thank you so much, Sylvia. I'm so sorry. Thank you so much. We're developing a way for people to submit new terms to us. And so those could be very technical terms that may or may not be picked up by the plain language glossary, but there's a very good chance that quite of them will be picked up. And for me, when I share about the glossary to other people, I tell them about it in case they're interested in a clinical trial, because I kind of use the spinal tap example. So if you don't know what the terminology for that is and you go look and they tell you this is what's going to happen, but you didn't know that was going to happen, and maybe that's not something you want to do. So being empowered with these tools to be able to go in and say in a very, short, with a picture, and there's an audible, and then you'll know, oh, this is what's coming. This is what they're planning to do. And yes, I'm okay with that. So having a much better understanding, or providing a way to have a much better understanding of that dictionary, is so important. And SCDM will continue to contribute words, and of course, our definition definition ideas over with MRCT as well as CDISC. I'm so glad to be part of this whole partnership.
And
Thank
I'm
you.
so grateful too. So thank you everyone too who came today. We'll be doing public review for the glossary opening up in June. So there will be a webinar explaining all that coming up. Kaylee already put that in the chat. And on the next slide are those resources around representation. And I just wanted to end on the next slide, just thanking everyone for being here today and being part of this community. This was a very technical, in many ways, not health literate. There was a lot of like acronyms and technical stuff, but really to undergird the robustness of plain language, if that even can make sense, but it does. It's like this idea that we can be really technical and have these technical standards that communicate clearly with patients and participants. And that's kind of the beauty of what we're doing right now. So thank you all. Thank you for the 2 extra minutes in your day. And these slides will be available and all the materials will be available. And please reach out to us if you want to start implementing this glossary and you don't know how. I know I sound a little bit like one of those infomercials right now, but do it. Come and join. Email me, contact us at the MRCT Center, and we'll walk you through how you can build it into your processes, into your materials, into your websites. All right. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Good afternoon and good evening and early morning, I guess, to those on the West Coast. And I wish you all the best. Thank you so much.